Hello everybody, my name's Josh Smith. I'm Head of Sales Enablement at the Guardian newspaper, and today I'm going to be talking about sales and marketing lead optimization. So I worked on this project with my team about 18 months ago. At the end of the project, when we moved it to business as usual, a couple of us remarked that it was such a successful project and such a great example of what sales enablement can do, working with sales and marketing teams, that would make a really good case study. But everyone's busy, time moves on, and strangely enough, a kind of window in my diary never opened up that I used to then write the case study. I use the project management system called Trello, which I think is really good, and I get their monthly newsletter, which also I think is excellent. And about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, I got their monthly newsletter, and I was reading it, and it was talking about a Ulysses pact. It comes from the Greek god Ulysses, who back in the day, I don't know when Ulysses was about, but back in the day, he was trying to get from A to B, and he knew he was going to get kind of distracted or pulled to one side by the harpies, and so he got his men to tie him to the mast of the ship so that he couldn't get distracted and he would get where he needed to get to. So and it's kind of example of where more office-based example for most of us. A more office-based example would be that if you had a lot of training that you couldn't quite bring yourself to write all the training materials because you find it extremely tedious writing training materials, you would create a Ulysses pack by inviting all the delegates, booking the room, sending out the invites, inviting your manager to it, and then all of a sudden you'd find the energy, time, prioritization, whatever it is, to write the training materials. So I thought that's a really interesting concept. And then literally about 2 days later, I got an email from the Sales Enablement Collective asking if I would like to present at this event a case study. And I thought, well, that's a great opportunity to test if the Ulysses pack worked. And I can say that it did, because obviously knowing that I'd be here presenting to you guys meant that all of a sudden I found the time to turn it into a case study. So my next question then really for me was, well, what am I going to call it? So I read a book by a guy called Charlie Mullins, who's Britain's most successful plumber. He's a multi-millionaire plumber who runs the plumbing company called Pimlico Plumbers, that you may have heard of. And the kind of premises of his book, which is called A Bog Standard Business, I'd really recommend it, is that by doing a number of kind of really basic things, really, but doing them really, really well, he got kind of an extraordinary result. And really, if I could go through this case study, in all honesty, we really did some kind of pretty basic things, but we did them pretty well, and we did get an extraordinary result. So I kind of thought, well, I'm being honest, I could probably call this basic lead handling on a CRM. And I thought, well, that's probably not going to be hugely helpful for the Sales Enablement Collective in terms of getting people signing up for it. So I thought, well, most of us in Sales Enablement come from a sales background. I thought, well, I could call it Our Road to Increasing Leads and Doubling Conversion Rates. I thought, well, maybe that's a bit too salesy. So then I chatted to Carla at the Sales Enablement Collective, and she suggested sales and marketing lead optimization. So I thought, that sounds great. We'll go with that. So what I'm talking through today is how we initially set up a lead capture process. It's worth noting that this is incredibly top level view of this. It's a very top level run through of kind of how the whole process worked. But I'm really happy at the end to answer any questions on more of the detail. So yeah, kind of run through how we set up the initial lead capture process, how we then work with the sales team to get them engaged, so we had the data from them that we needed, what that data then enabled marketing to do, a kind of side story on failing fast, and hopefully an interesting example of that. What we then did with the sales data and the optimization that now enabled us with that team, and then a kind of new approach we took at the end that I thought was of interest, or hopefully of interest. An important note on the data in this case study, because this is an actual live case study, the data's commercially sensitive. So what I've just used example data. So it's not the real data from the actual process, but it's kind of illustrative, and the trends it shows were exactly what happened. So yeah, it's worth noting that we set up this case study is to talk about a warm lead capture process. So we do have other processes to capture kind of stone cold or strategic leads, as we call them, and then kind of slightly kind of warmer leads. But these ones that I'm talking about today are the really warm ones that you'd probably describe as almost inquiries. So yeah, so the first thing we did is when we kind of did an audit, we really realized that we had a huge number of places where clients could arrive via our advertising website. And so we literally went through all the various areas where they could arrive and refine them all. So one of them was kind of ensuring that we were standardizing all the email addresses that we were using. And so we were aware of all of them. We could get rid of any ones that we didn't want. We didn't want any more, and merge them with others, so we could have some kind of few really standard email addresses. We used online chat for a while, which I'd really recommend, but we kind of upgraded how we're using it. We kind of put a new call to action on, we put it in more places, we made it a bit more kind of visible, and we got more information captured off the back of it. And that worked really well. We also slightly changed the way we work with the sales teams with it as well, which again was successful. Response to marketing emails, so we improved the process where we kind of do data capture when we're sending out white papers and so on. Online inquiry forms, so people can just come in and submit their inquiry. We made that really easy for people as well as really visible. That worked well. Dedicated phone numbers, so we standardized the various phone numbers that we were using so we could track all them. Yeah, we kind of did a bit of a deep dive on the self-service activity the clients do to pick up which would identify them as what activity we would define as kind of create a warm lead. Request a callback, so a really simple process where clients could request a callback. You'd be amazed how many people still do want that. And event signups, so a new process for events, be it online, kind of more obviously nowadays, or physical events kind of back in the day. Okay, and so what that enabled us to do was then we had full visibility on all warm leads. So previously we'd done a lot of activity, because the lead source hadn't been particularly well captured, we weren't really sure what it was driving. But now we really knew through all the various ways that we captured leads, we could really see, like, minute by minute, because obviously it was all going at Salesforce, so it was all live data. We could see it on dashboards, how many we're getting, how many email inquiries we were getting, how much online chat, how many online inquiry forms, what's happening in self-service. It's working really, really effectively. And you can see here at the bottom, I put an exciting new lead source. So we developed a new way of capturing warm leads, and we could see that, after week 5, we were just getting really high volumes of that, which we were all extremely excited about. Now, how do we close the circle with conversion data? So we can see in week 1 we created 169 leads versus week 5 where we created 288. But kind of what happened to all those leads? And so for that, we really needed the sales team, and we really needed them to engage with the process in the same way that the marketing team had done. Now, for any of you who worked trying to get sales teams to use Salesforce, that's probably one of the biggest challenges on Salesforce, getting the teams to fully engage with it. Hence the next slide. So yeah, we've all been there in those meetings where you're trying to get the sales team to click a few extra boxes, and you can just see that it's not going to happen. So we're kind of trying to change around the process here, in that what we did is we worked really hard and really early on with the sales and sales management team, right up to the senior leadership team, to get them engaged with the process, so we kind of really understood what the benefits were for them. It really helped having marketing so aligned with us on this, because they came to all those training sessions and they really showed kind of what work they were putting in to these sessions, and what work they were putting into these sessions, and the benefit of the sales team, and then by the information that they were hoping to get out, what that enabled them to do, and then obviously then benefit the sales team again. So that really helped. And I think as well, not having a sales manager or a sales enablement person or someone from the operations team talking about it, but having one of the sort of senior marketing team talking about it really kind of helped us. We got complete buy-in and support from sales management at all levels, and that's extremely important for this project. We upskilled the management team on the CRM use, so we spent a lot of time so that they didn't have to ask us for reports. They had their own dashboards where they could get live information, and they were really comfortable using them. It's tempting sometimes in these projects to build like hundreds of dashboards for people, but we built some really kind of standard dashboards with key information on that they needed, and worked with them. We kind of attended one-to-ones with them, attended team to meetings with them, and we could see actually that'd be useful to pull this one in, or we can get that out. And so they became really proficient on using the data, which obviously really helped with kind of enforcing it and kind of working with the sales team. Yeah, there was a daily process that we put in some kind of email alerts where the sales team weren't following the process, so we could really nip that in the bud early, and we worked with managers kind of where necessary on that. And then we ran kind of, obviously some really big carrots. We ran a weekly, monthly and quarterly targets and prizes based on conversion rates, because it really is a level playing field. If you send 2 people 10 leads each, and you know what the conversion rates are on those, and you can see who converts the most. If one converts 3 and one converts 5, the person who's converted 5 over a period of time, it's been a better job. So you can really reward. You can be kind of really strategic with your rewards. And yeah, and basically kind of that's kind of constant sort of positive nagging, if that's such a thing, from managers enablement. And it was all designed to support speed, quality and persistence, which we think are the 3 key things that you need for success with leads. So if you look at this charts here, this is put together by Harvard Business Review. It is a few years ago now, but it looks at some really interesting stats, and it kind of mirrors the thinking that we were having, or the experiences that we were having with leads. That if a client starts Googling for a particular product or a particular service, the likelihood is, because they're on Google, they're going to find 3 or 4 sensible providers, and then they're going to put their details in on those 3 or 4 providers. Now, if you're the last provider to go back, it doesn't matter how good your proposal is, you're in a real massive disadvantage in terms of conversion rates. So this one here, number 3, it looks at kind of the key, just literally if you're slow on your response, it just drops off a cliff. And then the other thing is that people are busy. So you might get your response back quickly, but then the client might suddenly their objectives or their priorities change for a few weeks or a few days or however long, or maybe even a few months. And so if you kind of keep persevering and trying to make contact, the organizations that keep doing that, because often the sales teams don't do that, so then your other organizations drop away, and then in the end you're the only person still making contact. So obviously quality needs to underpin all of that, but it's just making the point that it doesn't matter how good the proposal is, if you're last back and there's no persistence in it, your conversion rates are going to be terrible. So we built all our processes around this. Some of these you just can't capture, brackets, or we couldn't. So there's sometimes when you might run some fantastic marketing activity, but the client might just get hold of an old long-standing relationship via WhatsApp or something that you just can't pick up. Or it might be that they come direct through to someone through LinkedIn, or it might be that they've just come from a random source that we just haven't tracked. And so, although we felt really confident that we had the lion's share of lead sources captured, so we had that double benefit of the fact that we captured all, but we also worked really hard to make them kind of more visible and more sticky. We did also build a catch-all that sat underneath all that tracked the total volume of inbound activity. We used 2 different data sources to try and make sure that was as robust as possible. So then we could kind of see what was happening to the overall trends, as well as every specific lead source. Okay, so now if you go back to that initial slide that I looked at before, where you could see what the volumes of leads we're getting from all the different sources, you had the full circle now. So if you look at like for email inquiries here, initially we knew that in week 1 we had 23, but we know actually in week 1 what happened was 15 of those turned into opportunities, 8 of those turned into bookings, of which we made a total amount of revenue of X. The yield was Y, and we had a conversion rate to bookings of 35%. And then you can see that of the total, you can see that over time. So you start getting really accurate views of kind of the value of each of the various lead sources. And so what that meant was that marketing could now put their energies into kind of the stuff that made the money, and move their energies away and their spend away from the stuff that wasn't making the money. And what that meant was almost immediately the decline would stop that we were seeing, and it put almost all the lead sources went back into growth, which is just phenomenal, obviously for marketing, for the company and the sales team. So here's that example about failing fast. So you can see here that exciting new lead source we had. And I think this is a really interesting process for us, because lots of companies are kind of much more interested in good news than bad news. I think that's fair to say. And so often then with something like this, where it's really good, you know, like with all the leads, the sales enablement team qualify them all. So they're all marketing qualified leads before they go to the sales team. So we can see with these leads, we had the contact details, we had permission to contact, we had the client and a current relevant need. So we felt these were really, what we would describe as warm leads, marketing qualified, and we would send to the sales team. But the conversion rates were just consistently really low. Now, I think previously that would have been all run by anecdotal conversations in terms of why that was, what we needed to do about it. But we just really quickly, we picked that up. And so we're really able to dive into that and then just make a decision after a very short period of time, maybe even a month, just to stop that activity, which meant that marketing saved a load of money, sales saved a load of time because they weren't spending time on stuff that wasn't really working. So that was kind of hugely useful for us, even though that particular thing didn't work. Now the mirror, so I'm just going to move my picture again. The mirror of the data, the mirror of that data was the information we had on the sales teams now. So we could see that for each of the teams, as we were getting decent numbers of these leads, we could see for every team what their conversion rate was. So you can see here that the overall department average was running at 28%, just the example data, obviously. But you could see some teams were running at almost half of that, and some teams were running at almost double that. And so that then really made that we could put our efforts into the kind of, we could really direct our efforts accordingly in terms of sales training and making the sales material, but also for kind of team meetings where management needs to get involved. It was extremely helpful. A little side note here is obviously be wary of obsessing too much on conversion rates, though. Certainly it's very true in the short term. We became really kind of not obsessed is the right word, but we were really focused on conversion rate, and I think that did impact on yield because the teams were really pushing us to get that quick win from the client, versus doing proper needs analysis or full needs analysis, let's say, and maybe getting a bigger deal out of the client. So we did see yield slipping for a few weeks, but we quickly tweaked that to make sure we were looking at both things. But yeah, so this was hugely helpful from us, and then we could really dive into that. So if you look at this team C, that high performing team, if you look in here, obviously because we had the information for the team, we also had it for each individual rep. So you could see each individual rep, what their conversion rate was per leads, overall for leads and per lead source. And you would literally see stuff like teams converting at double the department average. You see reps converting at, individual reps converting far higher, maybe triple the height of other people. And so then that enabled us to bring in those top performing people to run training sessions, because if you're hearing something, if something's not going very well and you're being told by some operations you need to do it differently, it's kind of, you might, or your manager, you might kind of not really engage with that. But when you've got a colleague who's been given exactly the same set of leads as you, sitting on a very similar or identical territory as you, and they're converting at 2 or 3 times that you're converting, and they're talking you through how they're doing that, we found that extremely impactful. So that was very, very beneficial for the training and for the overall conversion rates. So we then were making sure that, or the managers were then bringing this data into kind of all their team meetings, one-to-ones, the coaching they were doing, and also interviews, which I'll come on to in a moment. So then, because we were getting kind of more of these leads, and they're really kind of critical to our business because there's such visibility on them, we kind of started thinking, well, what happens if they all get dealt with by people, kind of top quality converters? And so we ran an interview process. We ran an interview process to create a new warm leads team, made it really aspirational team, so people wanted to be on that team. And then we ran the interview process where obviously people were interviewed to be on that team, but also the key data that we were looking at is kind of how they had converted the leads historically. And you can see, what happens if every lead gets handled by someone at rep that pays quality? And you won't be surprised to know that what happened was the conversion rates rocketed. So now we kind of had this sort of perfect setup really, where marketing had everything that they needed to get to kind of do that with the lead volumes. And we had the best converters looking after those leads. So we were confident that when the leads came in, if there was any chance of booking them, they were going to get booked. And that just worked phenomenally well. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of take you through a summary of that. So capture as many leads as possible. It's really important that you want for this to be effective. You really go line by line through all the various weird and wonderful ways that clients can get in contact with you and all the advertising that you do to clients to try and make sure you're tracking those leads when they come in. Obviously, you've got to build them all into your CRM, and you've got to do it in a way that they hit your CRM really before they hit the sales team. Because if the sales team are getting an email or your contact or your chatting the sales team with information, and then a day later, 2 days later, it hits the CRM, then the chances of them doing the activity on the CRM is very low. So everything needs to be real time in the CRM and going out to the sales team via the CRM. Obviously, ongoing sales team engagement with them and the process is absolutely critical. Things are changing all the time. New lead sources are coming in, teams are changing, territories are changing, the market's changing. So you need to be working really closely with those teams. And we've still run weekly meetings with the team in question, and we're still meeting with people regularly and making changes. Use the data in all your training, coaching, team meetings, and one-to-ones forever. One of the big learnings for us was just how much easier it is to deliver. A lot of the messages or feedback we were giving to teams was just super positive because a lot of teams were just smashing it. But when you're saying to someone anecdotally, I just feel you do a really bad job with leads, it's a kind of really very extremely difficult meeting. But when you're just saying to that person in a one-to-one situation, I'm a bit concerned with your lead conversion because you're converting at half the average for the team, it's a much kind of calmer conversation because you're just looking at the data. So that was really powerful for us. So that's something that we'll continue to do. Decide what data is and isn't important, overanalyze to paralyze. So it's quite tempting to, particularly as you get comfortable with Salesforce and comfortable with the leads coming in, to build like a whole array of dashboards showing every possible angle of it. But you just kind of get a bit of brain freeze, understandably, with people. And so we just decided quite early on what were the key bit data that we're going to look at. And we just built those into the dashboard, and the stuff we didn't need and we just felt was over analysis we didn't use. Ensure everyone works off the same reports wherever possible. Again, sounds pretty obvious, but it's quite tempting sometimes. Sales manager, could you just build me a one-off bespoke report? Can you change this? Or a sales rep might ask for this, or maybe the SL team might ask for that. But then all of a sudden, you've got a whole different array of reports, all showing slightly different versions of the same stuff, maybe from slightly different views of it or slightly different filters on it. And it just causes loads of confusion. And so we really make sure that everyone is working off the same report. So when the junior rep looks at it, the senior rep looks at the report, the manager to the SLT, everyone's looking at a different version of the same report. Obviously, the manager's going to see the whole team versus just the reps in one team, but everyone's just working off the same set of reports. Embrace the ability to fail fast in equal measure to success stories. So tempting to kind of, every time we have some success to jump on that. But also with stuff that isn't working, really jump into that. And then that will save the marketing teams and the sales team time, which then mean they can put their energy into the stuff that is working. Liaising and working hand in hand with the sales team never becomes less important. I kind of possibly doubled up on that one, but I think it's worth it because that thing without the sales team engage with it and tracking the leads to the CRM, you don't have any data. All you know is how many leads you get in. You don't know what they're doing, and so working hand in hand with those guys and making sure it's continually working for them, it just never becomes less important. It's an absolute critical piece of work. I'm just going to move my screen just in case you can't see that. Doesn't need saying, but we have a pretty tough 6 months of lockdown across the board. But from a kind of data perspective, this just means that we're in a really, really strong position to support remote working for day one, because we can see straight away, if anyone's struggling, we can see it pretty much immediately, and we can make sure they're getting the extra support they need. So it's been incredibly helpful for us on that front. That's it. Thank you. And any questions? I'm hoping that's worked. Oh, great. Okay, so many thanks for the questions, everybody. I had a few questions that I wrote down during the session. So please chat on the side bar if you've got anything else you want to add in. Obviously, you can follow on with me on LinkedIn and on the Sales Enablement Collective Slack group afterwards. So I'll go through from the start. I think so. Stephen Dubrevet, I think I might be pronouncing your name wrong there. Apologies there, Stephen. So just a couple of questions. What is your qualification criteria for conversions? I think so. In terms of what we're qualifying them, or what the enablement team qualify these as marketing qualified leads, are that they contain a relevant client need. Ideally, they contain a budget, but not necessarily. They've obviously got contact details. It's a relevant organisation, and that we've got permission to contact. But if we've got all that information, then we would qualify them as a marketing qualified lead. Create the lead in Salesforce, tag it up to the relevant campaign, and then send it through to the sales rep. And I think that possibly answers your second question, which was, how do you keep reps from claiming a qualified lead when it was not? Well, because the enablement team create the leads themselves and then allocate them to the reps in Salesforce. What that means is the sales team then, there's nothing they can really do. They can reallocate the lead if it's not for them, but there's no way of them actually picking someone else's leads, if that makes sense, or creating a lead where there wasn't, where actually there shouldn't have been one created. So hopefully that answered your question. If not, then feel free to message me directly. So Chloe asked a question. She said, how did you identify which metrics should be prioritized? She also wrote, it's impressive that you got buy-in. So thanks for that, Chloe. And that buy-in was the key part to the whole element. It's very easy on the enablement team because there are some fantastic tools on Salesforce, as there are now on most CRMs, to kind of put your energies into building the process. But obviously, if the sales team aren't bought into it and they're not engaged with it, then you really have no data. But in terms of which metrics we should be prioritized, we kind of wanted to really boil it back to what we thought was most important. So that thing about speed and persistence. So one of the big things was overdue prospects, so ones that had gone over a certain amount of time without having any contact from the client, without the sales team being in contact with the client. So they would flag up. And then we would look at the leads that have been converted into opportunities, and then how they were showing in the pipeline, and then the close win revenues and percentages. And then the other bit we kind of look at is then overdue leads, so ones that have been sitting in progress for too long. And I think the final bit of information that we would look at is the kind of sort of slightly more miserable one, but is the mark dead reason. So when they kill off a lead, they have to pick the reason why it's dead. So we kind of analyse that, and that would help us in terms of qualifying out stuff and kind of making changes in marketing. Stephen Dubravak asked, how did you account for different deal sizes or close ratios based on source? Well, we'd look at overall what the overall conversion rate was for all leads per team, per rep, and then we'd look it down individually per source. So we would allow for the fact that we'd expect different conversion rates at different sources. And yeah, we ran very regular meetings with the management team. And we'd do a monthly kind of presentation of all the data and kind of what the stories were in that, and that then helped them with their team meetings and so on. And so that then meant that they kind of had really actionable data that they could use with their sales teams. So hopefully that answered that one. Jordan Cornish, he said, how are you currently analysing your best performers so you can replicate their success in your training and messages? I think I kind of answered that a little bit in the summary, I think. But one of the key points here is that I think in sales management, often you can be drawn into spending your time on your kind of poor performers, the ones that are struggling to hit target or have got issues, for whatever reason. And I think one of the beauties of this project is that we were able to put our energies as the sales enablement team into the top performers. And what that meant then really was that then, because we were really supporting them and kind of understanding what worked well with them, they kind of their conversion levels continued to rise, which then raised the bar for everybody. So then it wasn't a sales manager saying, "Oh, I think you should be converting at XX%," because that's just what I think. He or she was able to say, our top performers have converted this percentage, and that then pulled everyone else up. So I think that focus on the top performers, and that's not to say you're not providing support for the people that struggle a bit, but I think because we weren't the sales managers, we were the sales enablement team, it freed us up really to then just put our energies into top performance, which was really, really beneficial for us. Oh yeah, I think Christopher Bowler asked about how we capture the in Salesforce, and yeah, we use campaign codes as you'd expect, and we also use lead source and lead source details so we can track each lead. We've actually got currently quite a manual process for creating these leads in Salesforce, but we are just in the process of implementing Pardot, which hopefully will automate this stuff much more for us. I think that was everything, unless you disagree, Carla. Yeah, I think that was everything. Yeah, I think that's everything. If anyone wants to message me on LinkedIn, they're obviously more than welcome to. There's a really good Slack group for this conference, which I'd recommend people join. I'm on there as well, so you can message me on that as well. But yeah, thanks very much, everybody.